know about you, but I've been more active during the pandemic. I've been walking, I've been watching my diet, lost a couple of pounds, and also have been doing some sailing, which is something that my family enjoys doing, but is also great for social distancing, being outdoors, and also being physically active. Staying active is important for people of all ages, and that's what the topic of our show is today. We're talking about senior fitness, and we have some great tips to share with you if you're looking to start working out or if you'd like to help a loved one stay active. Today's guest is Rachel Ridgeway, owner of Ridge Senior Fitness. Ridge Senior Fitness is a Denver-based in-home personal training and group fitness company serving seniors 70 years and better. Yes, you heard that right. 70 years and better, which I love. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So I understand your company's fairly new. Can
Yeah.
you tell our listeners when you first opened your business or when you first opened your business?
Yeah. So I actually just launched this year. Horrible timing with the pandemic, of course, but March of 2020 is when I officially launched this business. So you can imagine it's been a little bit of a wild start, a little bit different than I originally had in mind. But when I launched this business, I saw a huge need for trainers that are focused on seniors. I think there's not a shortage of trainers especially in Denver. Denver is a very active city, but what I've found is a lot of trainers don't typically focus on the senior population. And so I wanted to create a business that was, seniors were the sole focus. So from day one, that's been kind of my message. I want to amplify a message of positive aging and kind of make it a little less taboo, a little less scary. So I try to share stories on my platform of what it looks like to be 90 and healthy. And hopefully in that I can, make it a little less scary to age. So that's kind of my goal with this business. Obviously, because of the pandemic, I thought I would be doing a lot more in-person training. It's been a little bit more virtual, which was interesting, but it's working for now. And I think we're all just, trying to figure out how to keep our lives moving in kind of a crazy time. So yeah.
Very, very exciting. I think
Yes.
the industry in the senior care industry in general, and when you look at the side of it in housing and care, those businesses are actually adopting technology like crazy right now. And I think
Mm-hmm.
also very often there are more and more older adults adopting technology at a rapid rate. So I think
Yes.
we can't forget about them there either. So yes, the pandemic presents a challenge for you for in person, but we need to figure out, because of isolation and other things, how we keep people connected and safe.
Yes.
So it's
Exactly.
the pandemic in general is not a great thing for society as a whole, but there are ways to find ways that we can help, and this is really exciting what you're doing. So
Thank
I
you.
also love how your business Ridge Senior Fitness serves seniors 70 years and better. I love that.
Yes.
And
Yes.
instead of an older,
Yes.
so tell me how you first became interested in working with seniors. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so it was actually very random. I was 16 years old applying for my first job, and I had a couple friends that worked at a local senior living community. I'm originally from McHenry, Illinois.
Okay.
So it was a very small community about 10 minutes from my home. I applied to be a waitress and I got the job and was just ecstatic to finally have a job. But had no waitressing experience. I ended up being pretty bad at it, to be honest. Was not a great waitress, but I was really good at interacting with my residents.
Yeah.
So, it was just funny because I would forget things all the time. I would spill, I dropped trays more times than I'd like to admit. But my residents still liked me. They liked having, me as their server. And I think it was just because I was good at keeping conversations going. And it was just a very weird thing that I discovered young. And so I had a range of jobs from 16 to 22. I was a CNA for a few years in high school. I was a trainer at a Brookdale community in Denver. I worked in home health. So I kind of did all sorts of, different jobs in senior living. And I always the common denominator for me was always, I liked working with seniors. but I had a hard time figuring out what long-term path I wanted to take, and I just graduated college at 22, and that was when I got my first training job, and I loved it. It was great, but I also now have this degree, and I think what's hard about coming out of college is you have all this college debt, you're trying to pay your student loans, and now you have this brand new degree, and I wasn't using it. So there was a part of me that was torn between doing what I loved, but then also feeling like, I needed to explore the corporate side, and try to see where that would take me.
Yeah.
So I ended up 7 years in HR software and was, pretty good at the work, but I just wasn't happy. And finally, I sat down with my husband a year ago. Gosh, yeah, it was a year ago now. And I kind of told him what I was thinking. And I just said, I just wasn't happy. I felt like I was just going through the motions of life. Every week, I was just kind of looking forward to the weekend. And I just don't feel like that's a way to live long term. And so I kept coming back to, when was I happiest in my career? And it was when I was a trainer. So I decided to, go back and get my certified personal training certification. I became a senior fitness specialist, and then
cool.
had basically in February, March of this year, put in my notice. I was all in. I decided to, go, dive headfirst into this, and then the pandemic hit in March. So it was kind of crazy, but it's actually working out pretty well. I feel like one benefit to this year is a lot of people are on technology. They're on their phones, they're on the internet. And so I felt like the message of my business spread a lot quicker because so many people were so tied to technology. So it ended up working out, and, it was just very different than what I pictured, but, I'm just kind of rolling with it for now and seeing where it takes me. So it's been exciting.
Entrepreneurship and business building.
Yeah, exactly.
Go with the flow. So tell our listeners what type of services you're offering.
Sure. So I do in-home personal training. I don't have a training space. I basically have all sorts of fun equipment depending on, what the person is looking to do. And then I bring those pieces to your home. Obviously, it's not a ton of people are doing in-home right now, but I do have a couple in-home clients. I also do virtual group classes. So I have a class called Soup Can Cardio, which is kind of a play on the pandemic. A lot of people have soup cans at home instead of weights. So I have that class. I offer, I do one-on-one virtual training as well for the people that aren't comfortable doing in person quite yet.
Yeah.
And then I just recently started offering virtual programming. So I'm doing it right now for a couple facilities in Washington. So there's people that are going to teach the classes in person, and I'm just providing the programming. So
that's great.
Yeah. So it's been pretty interesting to see how this is playing out. But eventually, once I am more in person, another service that I plan to offer, this is more specifically for dementia, Alzheimer's clients. I have in the past offered walking companion services, and this I found to be very beneficial for people that are maybe in later stages of dementia, and they maybe live in a memory care unit, and you can hire me to basically come and be an escort to get them out of the building, get them out for a walk.
Wow.
So maybe they're not, super fit and active and they can't really lift weights anymore, but they can go for a walk. So I have had clients that have done that in the past, where it's just strictly taking them on a walk a couple times a week. So eventually I would like to offer that as well. But with COVID, it's probably going to be a little further out. So
yeah, no, it's great. So when you're working with seniors, the seniors in any of your type of offerings, what is the main goal when you're working with seniors?
So my main goal is to keep people independent. I think training kind of depends on what stage of life you're at. Yeah. So for the senior population, I tend to focus on 5 primary movement patterns. So it's basically just the movements that we do every single day. And so the 5 patterns are the bend and lift. So like think of your squat pattern, getting in and out of a chair, or if you're into weightlifting, a deadlift.
Yep.
Then your single leg pattern. So if you're, reaching over to pick something up and you're standing on one leg,
Yep.
any sort of move that challenges that. So think of your lunges, or like a single leg squat or something like that. Then you have your push pattern, your pull pattern, and your rotational pattern. So if you're, twisting to pick something up out, off the ground or whatever. So I think of those primary movement patterns when I'm programming specifically for seniors, because if you can stay independent in those 5 patterns, you may not need help as soon as you would if you weren't training in that mindset.
Very
So
interesting.
yeah, so that's just how I look at training as a whole. And it's obviously very dependent on where the person is at functionally. A lot of people as they age, I always see low back, knee, and shoulder issues. Those are probably the 3 most common.
Yeah.
So certain things I could do with someone that hasn't had knee problems, I probably couldn't do with someone who's had 2 knee replacements. So it just really kind of depends. But keeping those movement patterns in mind is my main goal, because I think if you are training for those and you're staying strong in those, your chances of staying independent longer are higher. So that's how I take a look at it.
I think that's perfect. I mean, that's an incredible goal for any person who wants to maintain their independence, and that all makes sense. I don't know if you've read Joe Coughlin's book. He's the head of Age Labs at MIT, but they worked with CVS, and this is kind of off topic, and but they put a suit on the executives. I believe it was CVS, and it was a suit that changed your body as you age.
Oh, interesting.
And they had the executives go into the store and shop with this suit on.
Wow.
And they completely redesigned their pharmacies. Instead of putting the heavier stuff on the bottom, they put it on the top. They shortened the aisles, so older adults didn't have to walk all the way down to the end of the aisles and come up. So it might be something you might be interested in reading about.
Yeah,
Really
absolutely.
fascinating. So when people say seniors are too old to work out, what do you have to say to them?
Oh, I laugh. So one of the consistent comments I've gotten from my classes is thank you for providing a class that's not so boring. So I think when you think of senior exercise, I think everything or everyone thinks of like a sit and be fit type of workout, which is great. But everyone thinks of chair-based programming. I always include a chair as an option for moves, but I find that there are so many seniors that are stuck in these classes that are so easy that they're not challenging themselves. If you're not challenging yourself, it's not really providing the benefit that we're looking for with exercise. So, I mean, while there are definitely benefits to doing chair-based programming, maybe for somebody who's wheelchair bound and can't stand up and down super easily, I think I try to push the envelope a little further with my training style. I incorporate a lot of weights, resistance bands. So I think I'm coming at it from a programming standpoint of a younger mentality, where I weightlift regularly myself. I know the benefits and how I've seen it benefit my strength and shape of my body and my posture and all sorts of things. So I don't understand why it's not as big of a push in the senior space. I think it's just because it hasn't really been done. I think people are just afraid of falls. They're afraid of people with these injuries. But if you're talking to your client as you're training them, finding out if things hurt or maybe we need to modify. So if you have shoulder issues, for example, and you're doing like a front or a lateral raise, staying in at a 45-degree angle helps that pinching that people will feel in their shoulder. So just modifying moves based on some maybe pre-existing conditions that you have, but not being afraid to lift weights or add resistance to your workout and make them stand for a little bit of the training. I think it's
push a little,
push them a little, and they can do quite a bit. You'll be surprised. I have a 90-year-old client who was doing chair squats with a 4-pound medicine ball the other day, and just fine. She did, 3 sets of 10, like nothing. So I think you'll be surprised if you start to try a little bit more difficult moves with that population.
think some of it might be generational as well, right? I mean, I was
Yeah,
on the way back into the baby boomers. I was born in 1963. So
yeah,
in the 80s and 90s, my mom owned a women's health club. So I used to work for her. So,
yeah,
aerobics, the beginning of aerobics, and then, of course,
yep,
weightlifting. Uh, we were brought up with that, where in this generation, probably less. So there's might be a little barrier there too. But
yes,
yeah.
yeah.
So you talked a little bit about the structure of your programming from the sense of how you focus on helping them strengths with these five core
Hmm.
daily movements that people need to function well, right? And to continue to
Right.
function independently. You've mentioned some bands, you've mentioned some
Hmm.
chair, you've mentioned some weights. So, run us through just structurally what a program might look like. And do you use music? Just kind of describe for our
I
listeners what it looks like.
Yes, I absolutely do. So music, I have if you actually want to follow it, I have a Spotify playlist. It's called Ridge Senior Fitness.
Oh,
You can
great.
look it up if you want. So I have, gosh, it's from like 50s, 60s, 70s, up to 90s. It's
Yeah.
just kind of a mix of all sorts of music
Yeah.
that I find people tend to enjoy because, when you're working in the senior space, I could see somebody 70, I could see somebody 90. So I think mixing in different genres and different,
Yeah.
generations of music is fun. And so
Yeah.
I always bring an iPad to my training sessions. And when I teach my online classes as well, I have it streaming through the class.
Yeah.
So always music. I'm very big on music. But typically for like an in-person client is a little bit different than what I would do for a class. So in person, typically how I kind of structure it, we do a warm up, and then I tend to focus. I'll do like a mostly standing lower body series. I guess
Yeah.
it also depends how many days I'm seeing the person, but typically I do full body sessions because I'm only seeing people typically, I would say 2 to 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So you want to try to hit all the major muscle groups at least 3 times a week, regardless of what kind of training you're doing.
Yeah. That
So
was
we'll start off.
my next question in terms of
Yeah,
frequency,
yeah.
how often you recommend. So at least three
Yeah,
times a
two
week.
two to three typically,
Yeah.
depending on conditioning of the person. But then I also recommend walking, up to 5 days a week if you can.
Yeah.
So, but if we're walking through a full body session, for example, for an in-person client, we'll do our warm up. Typically, I try to do as much standing during the lower body series as we can. Sit down for breaks, so that way, if the person is a little bit more deconditioned, they can keep up and they're not overexerting themselves. And then I'll move into an upper body series, and then that'll be a mix of seated standing moves. Typically, by that point in the session, especially if it's an older client, they typically are a little tired by that point. So we're sitting a little bit more towards that part.
Sure.
And then I move into balance. So I always train for balance. I think it's super, super important. You'll see that on my social media all the time. I'm always trying to, encourage people to train balance, whether it's, with specific equipment or you're just standing on one leg, bouncing behind a chair. I think it's very, very important to work through that.
Yeah.
So we'll do a few balance moves and then we end with some flexibility. So we'll do a few, chair-based stretching, and then we'll use the wall, stretch up, some upper body and lower body moves, and then that's it. That's typically how I
Great. That's great. I mean,
structure.
the balance piece is so critical because as we age, falling becomes something that we need to be careful of. So the
Yes.
balance piece is pretty significant.
Well, and as you age, you start to lose your peripheral vision, which is for
Already
sight is
witnessing
one
it.
of, yeah, yes. So when you can't see as well, it makes things a little more challenging. Like if you're trying to step over something, it's
Yeah.
harder to, see. So I train for all the different senses. So we'll do, different moves where you close your eyes
Yeah.
and, narrowing your base of support. And we use unstable surfaces and all kinds of different things to really kind of push yourself in different balance types of moves. But definitely, definitely, definitely something everybody should be training regardless of age.
That's great. So for our listeners out there, and for some of the seniors that might be listening to us, what kind
Yes.
of equipment you mentioned bands? You
Yeah.
mentioned using maybe a chair for steady or for resting. You mentioned some weights. So tell us a little bit more about the equipment that you work with
Yeah.
when you work with seniors.
Yep. So I have, a range of different dumbbells. I think I have up from 1 pound to, I think I even have 12-pound dumbbells.
Yeah.
Don't typically use the 12 pounds as much.
Yeah.
But they are there for a stronger future client in case
Yeah.
anybody's listening.
Yeah.
But then I use medicine balls. They're really great for, like chest press movements. They're the big balls. They're,
Yeah.
rubber, and you can bounce them on the ground too. So you can do some rotational movements with them. Is really great. I use all sorts of different resistance bands. So I do the loop bands. I actually just did a post this morning with my client Carolyn. She has a loop band around her knees, so a couple lower body movements there. I also use the ones with the handles, the free ones that are just flat.
Yeah.
There's a ton of different resistance options out there.
Yeah.
And then for lower body, I do ankle weights.
Yeah.
So I have a range from, I think it's 1 to 7 pounds ankle weights.
Gotcha.
So we'll do all sorts of different movements with those. And then another option for people that maybe are dealing with arthritis or Parkinson's, sometimes the dumbbells are a little harder to squeeze.
Yeah.
So I have soft weights.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to remember the brand. I think I'd have to look. But they're basically these rubber balls with sand. So it's a little easier to hold for some people because it just kind of fits in the palm of your hand. You could do like bicep curls with those and shoulder press. Sometimes I find those are a little easier. I don't have any of these personally, but I have seen for people that are struggling with arthritis, there are hand weights that have wraps. So you can slip your hands in.
Yeah.
So that way you don't have to focus on the grip quite as much.
Yeah.
So that's another option for.
I have a pair of those downstairs. There's a little foam on the inside too.
Yeah.
So it wraps around here, and then the dumbbell is on this side. So I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So
and
these
then
all sound kind of small, right? They're not like, these aren't big pieces of equipment that people need to have in their house, even if they wanted to do it from home, right?
Nothing. Yeah. None of it's too big. I would say my biggest piece of equipment I have a Bosu ball. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but if for anyone who may not be familiar, it's just like a flat semicircle ball that I use for balance training. So that is kind of awkward to store just because it's a little large, but again, any sort of balance equipment that you could keep. I also have the company is called ProSource Fit. It's a foam pad, and you can do different balances on that. It just provides like an unsteady surface. So it challenges your ankle balance a little bit. But those are really the key pieces that I keep on hand. I find that they're really universal and you can get a really great workout. And then from, the client side, I always have them use a chair. So preferably without armrest. Something nice and sturdy. But then you can do, seated exercises for lower body. You could do like, leg extensions from the chair squats, all kinds of different moves. So
it helps you with balance too as you're getting started, right? It helps you as you build up on your balance, right? To have something to lean on. So you mentioned something earlier. You have a class that has a really cool name to it. It's called Soup Can Cardio. So tell us a little bit more about that and where that came from, and it's very cool.
Yeah, so actually I have to credit it to Rachel from Dementia by Day. I don't know if you follow her, but her and I had an interview where we worked on some, full body moves for her clients or for her followers. And we were just chatting off the cuff one day, and she's like, gosh, you know what you should call your next class? Soup Can Cardio. And I just loved it. I'm like, that is so clever. And it just stuck. And so I figured, I've heard it 1,000 times during quarantine, people saying, well, if you don't have dumbbells at home, grab a can of, soup and do some curls. And so it was very fitting for the time of life we're living in right now.
Yeah, that's great.
But the class, I run them, they're just 30 minutes. They're pretty quick and easy. I do offer a recording option for those. So if you sign up for class and you're not able to make the live session, the recording will be emailed to you and it's live for 48 hours. So it's a nice option if, maybe, because typically I teach the classes at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard. And so, if that's not in your schedule and you can't do that, you could always opt for the recording and do it at your leisure.
That's a great
But they're very, but they're very, very strength focused. I would say I always have, I encourage a pair of dumbbells if you have them, but again, you can bring soup cans if that's what you have available.
Yeah.
And then I have everyone bring a towel. We work on some mobility and some stretches with the towel.
Yeah.
And then it's really just, typically the first half of class is upper body or lower body standing. And so we'll do a lot of full body movements with the soup can. So whether it's like a lunge into a punch or, all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
Typically that first part is the standing series. And then we do an optional seated part of class where mostly upper body focused, but if you need to sit for that portion, you can,
Yeah.
or keep standing. And then we do the mobility work and the stretching at the end. So
That's great.
it's a super fun class.
That's awesome. And with the resistance training, can you explain to our listeners why resistance training is so important?
Yes. So especially, gosh, I can't even amplify this message loud enough. For the aging woman, osteoporosis is something that so many people, I think the last statistic I saw was like 1 in 3 or one in
Wow.
five. I can't remember. Women will experience osteoporosis at some point in life.
Yeah.
So basically, when you weight lift, it puts stress on your bones and it causes them to have to rebuild and strengthen because you're putting them under stress.
Right.
So if you weight lift throughout your whole life, your chances of developing osteoporosis go down pretty significantly.
Yeah.
And it's even shown that in people that have already developed osteoporosis, it can actually help generate new bone growth. So you're not going to reverse it probably, but you could potentially slow the progression. The other big benefit that I see with weight training is a lot of the movements that you're doing, you're offsetting your center of gravity a little bit. And when you have weight, it challenges your balance. So if you're doing a lunge and you have hand weights in your hands and you're maybe moving them out to the side with you, it's challenging that balance because you're wanting to lean with the weight. So certain moves, it'll challenge all sorts of different things, but obviously improving your strength is the most obvious benefit. But those are some ones that maybe you don't think of, preventing osteoporosis, strengthening your bones, and also helping with your balance. So maybe you're not doing specific balance training, but because you're offsetting your center of gravity with that extra weight, it is in turn challenging your balance. So
very interesting. So you went through the 5 primary movement patterns, and one of them was called the bend and lift movement. So
yes,
you have some great exercises for that movement that I'd like to share with our audience now, if that's okay.
yeah, that's perfect.
So the first primary movement pattern is the bend and lift. So you'll see this in everyday life, maybe picking up a child off the ground or just trying to stand up out of a chair. So from a fitness perspective, there are 2 main exercises that kind of tackle the bend and lift. So before we jump into those, I do want to cover, here I have 2 3-pound dumbbells. If you don't have any dumbbells at home, just find something around the house. A couple of examples would be, I have a can of refried beans, and then I have a plastic water bottle. These are both about 1 pound, just for reference. So find something you may have lying around at home and just, add it in for a little bit of extra resistance. So I'm gonna set these down. I'm gonna pick up my 3-pound dumbbells here. So first, to kind of talk you through the first exercise in this series, it is called the deadlift. And in order to properly execute a deadlift, you have to know how to do the hip hinge. So I'm gonna stand on an angle here so I can show you what I'm talking about. But really you wanna focus on pushing that butt back, kind of like you're trying to shut a car door. So just bending, you can even keep your hands on your thighs to cue yourself to keep the proper form, but just bending and pushing back and then standing tall. So now to add weights to that, I'm just gonna keep these in front of my thighs. I'm gonna stand nice and tall and I'm gonna push back, bring the weights to about my knees and stand back up. So that is the deadlift. The second main exercise in this group is the squat. So I'll stand back a little bit so you can see my full body. I'm gonna hold on to the dumbbells for this. You could drop the weight if it's not comfortable, or you could hold on to the chair if you need to. But I'm gonna hold my weights up at my chest and I'm just gonna squat down and stand back up. You can play with your foot placement here. If you wanna take your feet nice and wide, this is called a sumo squat. Again, you're just squatting down and standing back up. Squatting down and standing back up. So that is the squat. Now, one other variation I did want to show here, I'm going to bring my chair forward so you can see this. Now this is a chair squat. If you feel unstable standing without holding onto a chair, and maybe it just makes you feel more comfortable to have something there in case you fall, the chair squat's for you. So I have my chair behind me, and you can't really see, but I have it sitting on a mat. You want to make sure it's on a stable surface so that chair doesn't slide back and you go falling backwards. So I'm going to stand just slightly, a couple inches in front of my chair. Smooth this a little bit. And I'm just going to sit down and stand back up. Now, if you want to increase the challenge here, you can just tap and then stand up. Otherwise, if you feel more comfortable just completely sitting down, you can do that. Hands on your thighs if you're not comfortable keeping them up at your chest. And that is the bend and lift pattern.
Rachel, somebody's just an older adult, just starting out an exercise program. What is some of the advice that you would give them to get started?
I would say start slow and very simple. You don't want to be, I think specifically anyone that's on the internet right now, it can be very overwhelming because you'll see 100 different exercise routines and everyone's claiming they're the best that you should be working on. They're, you should be doing only this type of training and nothing else.
Yeah.
I would say stick with what you enjoy. You may not enjoy traditional weightlifting, but if you can find a way to incorporate it, maybe you go for a walk, but you bring some hand weights.
Yeah.
So just trying to find ways that you can add resistance to something that you already enjoy doing. Any sort of movement is better than nothing. So I think just trying not to get so overwhelmed with all the different choices and all the different types of exercise that exist, and just finding a way to move your body and just be consistent for 2 days a week, whatever that movement is, 2 days a week. And then from there, just try to keep increasing. And then maybe start to add in new types of exercise just to see if you like it, if you don't like it. But that would be what I'd recommend, is just start off with walking 2 days a week for 10 minutes.
Right. And then start to build off of it. It makes sense now.
Exactly.
So my dad is, I think, 78. Dad, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
78. But he drives a launch. He keeps busy at the boatyard. But I know he doesn't do a lot of exercise right now. So I'd love to encourage him to. So for those family members out there that are supporting an older adult and would love to see them be more active, what advice do you have to them? Would it be kind of similar? Just get them out for a walk and get them moving, or what's your thought?
I would say start slow. Maybe take them out on a walk a couple times a week. See if they start to enjoy that. Then maybe encourage some stretching. I've seen that even just regular stretching can encourage somebody to set aside a certain number of minutes every single day to then kind of train your brain to start thinking of exercise and thinking of ways to move your body. So that's one that I love to start with for people that maybe aren't super excited about exercise, because they'll start to feel a little looser. They'll start to notice things maybe don't hurt as much, just simply from stretching and going on a couple walks a week. So then from there, then you can try to maybe encourage adding in some small, like maybe pick 5 moves and do 1 day a week where you're just doing 5 moves, 1 set each, starting very, very slow of, a couple different movements with maybe a couple dumbbells or something like that. But I always say to start slow, because I think what gets people into trouble is they try to take on the world from the beginning, and it may go well for the first couple of weeks, but then if it's not a habit that you've already established, a lot of people tend to drop off, and then they feel like they've failed, and then they don't really want to start back up again. So I think just starting slow, 10-minute increments, maybe a couple times a week, just to start training your mind to start prioritizing that movement. It makes it a lot easier. And I think if you are with somebody, if you're taking care of a parent, for example, that's living with you, just encouraging them, maybe doing it with them. A lot of times when I'm training a client that maybe isn't super excited to train, I'll do the movements with them, and it makes it more fun, because then we're kind of talking and doing it at the same time. People don't think as much if they don't feel like they're being observed. So I think if you're doing it with them, sometimes it just takes the pressure off. So that's something I've found that is helpful for people that maybe aren't super excited.
We used to do that when my mom had her health club. We used to take
Yeah,
somebody through the first few times, kind of through a circuit, and
yeah,
we used to do the
exactly.
exercises and stretches with them, to teach
Hmm.
them form and stuff. So that makes total sense. So as you know, fall prevention is a big topic in seniors at home or in senior living or senior
Yes.
communities, with balance being, primary. What type of exercises can help seniors with their balance? Maybe you could just talk about one or two and
Yeah.
describe it.
So I would say the number one thing, especially if you're training on your own, or if maybe you're not super comfortable as a spotter, train in a corner of your room. So that way you have both sides of the wall in case you do fall. It just makes it a little easier if if you have a chair, you can use the chair as well. But I find that being in a corner can challenge you a little bit more because then you're not holding on necessarily to something.
Yeah.
But the first thing I would say is if you've never trained balance, start on 2 feet and just start narrowing your base of support. So when we stand, our feet are typically about shoulder width apart.
Yeah.
So try to keep your feet close together and just try to, hold that pose. Close your eyes. It's a very simple way to challenge your balance, but when you lose your sight, you'll start to notice you rock a little bit.
Hmm.
So that's a good way to introduce balance training if you're not super comfortable. And then a really simple progression is just to move to 1 foot.
Hmm.
1 foot with your eyes open first, and then 1 foot with your eyes closed, and then switch feet. So that doesn't require any equipment, but it's a really great way to just start somewhere. Another really easy one to do that doesn't require any equipment is a tandem stance. So standing with your right foot forward and your left foot directly behind, so like toe to heel.
Yeah.
And so standing in that position first, just trying to hold that position. And then you can even challenge it a little bit further and do a walk the line. So imagine you're walking a tightrope,
Yeah.
going forwards and backwards. Great home exercises you can do with no equipment. But again, I would encourage if you're new to balance training or not super confident, always be in a corner or with a chair, just so that way you do have something to hold on to if you lose your balance. But those are just some easy ones.
That corner is a great idea. I never would have thought of
Yeah.
it. So
Yep.
I've done some balance stuff, just watching some TV and doing some Paula B, I think her name is. She has some
Yeah.
classes. I was watching her classes, and I never even thought to use the corner because she does a little bit
Yeah.
of balance exercise too. Very
Yep.
interesting. Is there anything else you would like to add or share with our listeners that you think is important or you'd like to communicate?
I would just say one thing I hear quite often is people get discouraged if they, maybe they've started something in the past and then they fell off the wagon. Just never be afraid to jump back in. It doesn't need to be what someone is telling you is the best exercise. Just
Yeah.
find a way to move your body. Don't overthink it, especially during, the time we're living in right now. If
Yeah.
you're a regular gym goer and maybe you don't have that option right now and you're stuck at home, just find unique ways to get creative in your home space. Go
Yeah.
out for a walk. If you live in a place that has great hikes, go out for a hike, get some fresh air. But again, just prioritize some sort of movement, I would say is my biggest tip. You'll feel better. It'll clear your head. Your body will thank you for it in the future, but just trying not to get so stressed about what type of exercise and just kind of go off gut feeling, what feels best in that moment.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So Rachel, how can our audience learn more about Ridge Senior Fitness? How can they see your stuff and get
Track
in
me
contact?
down.
Track you down? Yeah, exactly.
So I would say I am biggest on Instagram. My handle is at Ridge Senior Fitness. You'll see there I share a ton of tips. I'll do some workouts there that are aging friendly. So it's not for someone younger. It's typically for somebody 78 plus is kind of what I'm focusing on. But I'll offer tips and I'll offer different movement options. I offer some balance series examples if that's what you're looking for. And then I share my clients there as well. So if you just want just some feel good videos, that's kind of the platform I'm trying to build, is just a good space where you can see these healthy, active seniors, and hopefully it helps people smile a little bit. But
Yeah.
I also do have a website. My website is ridgeseniorfitness.com.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook as well. And I think that is just Ridge Senior Fitness. You could just type that in the search. But I would say Instagram's probably where you'd want to follow me. That's where I put a lot of energy. So
That sounds great. I was just going to say, can you let us listeners know, the different channels? So you got
yes,
Instagram, you got your website, and then you're also on Facebook.
Facebook. And I do have a LinkedIn as well, if that's
Okay.
for any professional out there that's looking to check up
That's
on my
perfect.
LinkedIn.
Well, yeah. So in case they want to utilize your services to help them with the
Yes,
programming in their community, so that makes total sense. But Rachel,
exactly.
it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining the show today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. I hope you found all those exercise tips helpful. It's important for people of all ages to stay active and healthy. That does it for this week's show. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Aging Choices and Twitter at My Aging Choices. Thanks for watching.